Becoming Henry Lee by David Yu. Ching Chong's real name was Henry Choi Lee, but when he started the 8th grade, one of his classmates called him Ching Chong, and it stuck. At first, this bothered him. Who wants to be called Ching Chong after all? But it would soon turn out that what his classmates called him was the least of his problems. Before his father was transferred to Connecticut for his job, the Lees lived in Southern California, where Henry was surrounded by other Asian students. But at Renham Middle School in Renham, Connecticut, he was the only Asian kid. Renham was an affluent town and home to the best school in Connecticut, which was the main reason Henry's parents had moved there. They wanted to give their son a leg up toward getting into an Ivy League university, which would then give him the best chance of eventually becoming a doctor or a lawyer. A doctor or lawyer commands respect in community, they'd often say. So does proper grammar, Henry would retort, but they'd ignore him. The adult Lees fit some of the Asian stereotypes nicely, but not Henry. Everyone at school assumed he was a nerd. They were certain he was a whiz at numbers, music, video games, and kung fu, like all Asians must be. But in fact, Henry was horrible at math and could hardly play the piano despite the private lessons his parents had arranged for him since he was 4. He got dizzy playing first-person shooter games because of a balance problem caused by the perpetual inflammation of his inner ear, which also meant that when it came to martial arts, Henry was clueless. Within a month of starting 8th grade in this new town, Henry decided that he absolutely hated being Korean, or rather, he didn't like being different. He made it his main goal to change people's perceptions of him. So he never studied and swore off video games, which he didn't like playing anyway, and Asian food. At the Renham Galleria food court, Henry made it a point to eat pizza, even though the slices were always a little cold, and avoided the comic book store and gaming depot. The cool white boys in his grade sat with their equally cool girlfriends, whose dyed hair always came out kind of blue-looking instead of the intended black, and ate the teriyaki combo number 3 from Chang Gourmet after spending hours reading manga and trading used video games. Another problem, at least as Henry saw it, was that people could tell from a mile away that he was Asian. So Henry started wearing white baseball caps with the brim pushed down low, trying to hide his jet black hair and smaller upper eyelid deprived Asian eyes. One weekend, after watching an episode of some Nickelodeon show where the star had bright blonde hair and was beloved by everyone, he ran to the store, bought a bottle of Color Me Blonde, and dyed his hair. At school on Monday, he hated himself for not thinking through his decision. Kids kept asking him if the carpet matched the drapes, which Henry didn't quite understand, given that they'd never before seemed interested enough to inquire about his house, though deep down he had a feeling it had something to do with the fact that his newly blonde hair clashed with his still black eyebrows. Kids also teased Henry by pretending to talk in broken English, even though he had a perfectly good American accent. He decided he had to make it even more obvious that he didn't speak the way they thought a Korean would. The following weekend, he decided to adopt a Southern accent, so he rummaged through his parents' old DVD collection. Unfortunately for Henry, the one movie the Lees owned that took place in the South was their boxed set of Roots, an epic TV miniseries about slavery. That Monday, students were more confused than convinced by his new accent. "Late for class again, Ching Chong?" a kid asked as Henry struggled to open his lock. "Never you mind, boy," Henry replied in his best Roots voice. I hear the teacher's fixin' to be late for class on account of the coffee machine in the lounge being done busted. So he gonna have to get his coffee from down yonder in the cafeteria where done. Chinese sure sounds a lot like English, the kid said. What the heck did you just say? Dashing off to class, Henry tried to get a laugh by insulting the teacher in his new voice. Lord almighty, I hear done tell you smells right like a horse, he told her. Sadly, his classmates didn't understand what the heck he was saying. The teacher must have, though, because she gave him 3 days of detention. For the rest of the day, Henry simplified his southern accent by sticking the word ain't into every other sentence. Nobody paid much attention. Obviously, his linguistic efforts were failing to convince anyone that he was a white boy whose daddy owned a plantation. When Henry's mom picked him up after school, Henry was so depressed that he didn't see her pull up. She rolled down the driver's side window and hollered, Henry, you get in car now. Yeah, Ching Chong, you get in car now, the other kids hooted. Henry hurried to the car, embarrassed by his mom's broken English. The next afternoon, even though he lived several miles away, Henry walked home after detention. His mom saw him walking down West Renham Road and slammed on the brakes. What are you doing? Traffic is dangerous. Get in car now, she shouted. I thought I'd save you some gas, Henry said, looking around feverishly before diving into the back seat. Thanks to the unchangeable shape of his eyes and his parents' undeniable Asian accents, Henry realized he was never going to convince his peers that he was white. It was going to take a miracle for things to turn around. But luckily for Henry, a miracle was waiting for him in study hall the first day back from winter break. Marcy Spatucci, the most popular girl in the 8th grade. And although she had never said a word to Henry before, when Marcy saw Henry sitting there all alone, she asked him out of the blue, You're good at math, Ching Chong. Can you help me with my homework? Up to this moment, Henry had always gotten frustrated when classmates asked him for help on math homework, but this time he agreed. Marcy was too pretty to deny. As he taught her how to do math, making up rules and formulas as he went along, he realized that he'd finally stumbled upon the solution to his social woes. He'd been going about it all wrong. It turned out, rather than trying to convince everyone he wasn't Asian, the key was to become uber Asian. Wasn't this proof? For the first time ever, Henry Choi Lee was hanging out with the most popular girl in school. After school that day, he accompanied his one sort of friend, a pale, perpetually bloody-nosed kid named Sam who lived down the street, to the mall, where they happened upon a group of kids from a rival middle school talking smack with kids from Renham. Henry decided to test his new theory. He stalked over to the fight, crouched low, and started growling and shoving air around with his hands. At first, his classmates looked as stunned by his maneuver as their rivals, but one of them moved closer to Henry and said, You mess with us, you mess with a karate kid. Yeah, Henry could kick anybody's butt at Farnham, another one added. He's got a 4th-degree black belt in Kung Fu. For real? One of the Farnham middle schoolers asked. Henry nodded and kept yowling. For the first time, he saw his classmates beam at him. Why's your nose bleeding? The rival kid asked Sam. He got out of line, Henry muttered ominously. The Farnham kids backed off, and his classmates gleefully patted him on the back. As Henry fist-bumped them one by one, he wondered why he'd hated stereotypes so much. What was so wrong with people mistakenly assuming he was a genius? that he was good at math and science, that he was a martial arts master. Obviously, the key was to prove that he was the most Asian student in the history of middle school.